You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Have you ever heard of Candyman? If you look in the mirror and you say his name 5 times.
In cities everywhere.
Candyman?
They whisper his name.
Let's roll, bruh.
In this neighborhood is a house where souls never rest. You're invited to share their secrets.
I've been waiting for you boys.
You're invited to share their tales.
Unless, of course, you're scared.
Tales of madness. Of revenge.
The dolls don't want you there. They want reparation.
Of horror.
He thinks he needs to kill the monster.
Candyman.
It's just a story.
Candyman.
Candyman.
Just a ghost story.
Candyman.
An entire community starts attributing the daily horrors of their lives to a mythical figure.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss 2 films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
We're talking Tony Scott taking 2 of the most crazy scripts I've ever seen and directing the hell out of them. So, yeah, join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for over 3 years. I think there's something like 90 bonus episodes now, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, which will be of interest for today's episode.
Yes.
So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we have a bunch of shout-outs to give this week. We have Christopher McCullen, Robert Chakowski, Junis Latovara, Chris Higgins, Daniel Roth, Paul Myrick, Carson Shepard, Alex Pittard, Evan, Daniel Shaharudin, Logan Gartner, Polly... You guys are getting tough with me. Listalo and Robert Wells. So thanks to all of you folks for signing up. Hope you're enjoying those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug is always Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know that you are. I see you right now listening. Scroll down to the bottom and give us a good old rating and review down there. Helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the very last plug is merch. If you guys like the poster art that local, based out of Toronto, horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the podcast, you can get that basically put on anything you want. A pillow, a notebook, a hoodie, a shirt, whatever you want, even if you just want a poster like Jamie and I have in our own places.
Oh, yeah.
You can get that at the link in the description or at sleazoidspodcast.com if you're interested. But yeah, that is the intro. You guys know the drill. Welcome back to another week. I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us, and we would have been talking about Abel Ferrara gangster films starring Christopher Walken. Very different kinds of styles of existentialism. We had King of New York from 1990, which is a very beautifully shot film, so beautifully shot that Abel actually kind of takes offense at how gorgeous it is.
Yeah.
And he followed it up by kind of subverting King of New York with The Funeral, which is just one of the bleakest
saddest films I've ever seen.
Yes, we can't even really spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it or listened to the episode yet, but we went long on that episode with Rob, as we always do, talking about gangster films with him. But yeah, we had a lot of fun breaking down really, really bleak, sad, subversive gangster films by Abel Ferrara 2 weeks ago. That was any podcast listener of choice. And then last week, we did one of the episodes you guys have been asking for a long time, and one that we kind of teased very early on in the first year of the show when we did our Jackie Chan episode. we finally hit Lau Kar-Leung, because we talked about how his relationship with Jackie Chan on Drunken Master 2 that they worked on together, and kind of the bit of the fight that they got into, the different styles of choreography, where Jackie kind of wanted the more grounded, realistic, what can the physical body really do, even if it's still absurd because he's an amazing athlete. He likes that realism to it. Oh, yeah. Whereas, Lau Kar-Leung likes kind of like the more expressionist quality of, wires and pageantry and the camera moving around just as much as the performers do. Right. So we broke down two of his, most acclaimed films. We talked about 36 Chamber of Shaolin from 1978, a movie about giving Kung Fu back to the people. Yes. And 8 Diagram Pole Fighter from 1984, which is basically like all of the themes and tragedy of a 3-hour war epic condensed into 90 minutes straight of the most insanely choreographed action you've ever seen in a movie. Yeah, truly unbelievable athleticism in that film. I don't think it's rarely matched by any other martial arts film that I've seen. Yes, the classic 70s into the 80s Shaw Brothers kung fu action was insane, and Lau Kar-Leung was one of the finest directors of it. And 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, probably, honestly, Jamie and I's favorite kung fu film. So if you haven't listened to that episode, patreon.com/Sleazoids Podcast. That was last week's episode. But moving on to this week, continuing a kind of nice trend that we haven't been able to do for a while, we have an episode that ties into the release of a new movie. New movies are coming out. New genre movies are coming out. Movies we're excited to see. Yeah. It's very beautiful. Hopefully we're not jinxing it by, finally timing all of these episodes that we had probably set in stone like months a year or two ago. Yeah. That Top Gun's finally going to come out, so we're finally going to do that Tony Scott episode as well as the one that we got coming next week. But yeah, so we have a very special episode that's been planned for a very long time. I know a lot of patrons have been very excited about it. So this week we are going to be talking about Candyman from 1992 and Tales from the Hood from 1995. And to talk about these two films, we have a special returning guest. Hasn't been on since the early days of the show, but many of you will know him because I know that a lot of people on our Discord, sometimes his Discord gets brought up in ours. We have a lot of members of both, we'll say. But that is the host of the Struggle Session podcast, Leslie Lee. Leslie, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
No problem at all. I mean, I didn't realize how long it had been since we had you on, because we've had a lot of guests, probably some of them kind of come back on yearly, and I had to check the dates I was like, is that how long it's been since we've talked to Leslie? So I'm very glad.
The thing is, like, every time I see you doing the episode, I see it, and it's like, damn, I wish they asked me to do that episode. Like, every single, you have done so many of my favorite movies over the years. Like, actually, if you showed me the list of the shows you've done and the list of the shows I've done to me before I start the show, I've been like, oh no, that's my podcast. Obviously, I'm doing, Lady Snowblood and stuff and fun stuff like that. And Prisoner Scorpion 701. I'm not having to fucking watch Star Wars 7 or whatever.
Well, next time we'll have you decide the films as well.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking that's why next time we got to reach out to you and we got to have you pick the films again. But we were very glad when you agreed to come on this episode, because these movies are really good, and I already knew that you were a fan of Candyman. But yeah, maybe you can tell us just before we jump into them, like what's your relationship with these two films?
Well, it's kind of complicated, right? So we're doing both of these because these are both considered, black horror, right? Mm-hmm. But Candyman is not a black horror film. It stars a white lady. It's directed by a British director, white British director, based on a story by Clive Barker. But the thing I always liked about it's about Clive Barker, and I got this from my older brother. He always had a sort of, especially and at this time, I feel like his horror movie spoke to an urban audience that a lot of other stuff didn't. Like, most black people I knew, would watch a Hellraiser, would watch a Nightbreed, even though there's not a lot. These casts aren't diverse. They don't have a lot of black people in them. Candyman does, of course, but it felt like his horror just seemed a little bit more real, more urban, more based on day-to-day life compared to some of the other horror stuff. So even though it's not really I just view Candyman as just a horror film. I view Candyman like, Freddy, Jason, Candyman sort of thing, but I see why people view it as this sort of explicitly black horror film. And it is one of the horror films that deals with, class issues, specifically race issues specifically, and talks about real shit that was happening to people at the time in the film. Mm-hmm. That's just good horror. Horror should be all the time anyway.
Absolutely.
But it just so happens that Candyman has this reputation for being like a more explicitly political or social. But when you're watching the movie, it's just a good horror movie based on real shit that people identify with. There's no you don't have to be trying to make a political statement to it. It just came naturally to these two white Brits who have an understanding of class to to address these issues in it. Now, Tales from the Hood, of course, very different. That is explicitly a black horror movie. But what I love about it is it's as good as any white horror movie always has been and always will be. Incredible special effects.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Great storytelling. All of it holds up. When you're young and black, and this is at a time when you black people weren't even on TV. You know what I'm saying? You had one or two sitcoms. BET had to exist because there weren't black people. Now, Tales from the Hood comes a little bit later, but I think people understand that they didn't play a lot of black music videos on MTV, hip hop. The media was still trying to figure out hip hop. So for Tales from the Hood to come out, I remember it being so popular because it was just as good as Creep Show or Tales from the Crypt or The Twilight Zone. It had all that budget and craft behind it, and it still holds up to this day as one of the best anthology horror films of all time. Absolutely excellent. It was a joy to watch again, and it is explicitly political, in your face political.
Very unsubtle, but in a really endearing way.
Yeah, endearing way, unsubtle. Heavy handed, but still analyzing multiple sides of the issue in a way that it is of all the issues that in a way that's not just polemical. Even there's moments where you might feel sorry or scared for the racist cops or the Klansman politician. The movie still is a movie and doesn't just is very cartoonish in a lot of ways. But I think actually the storytelling it takes the issues quite seriously.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very excited to dive into both of these with you. So we're going to start off here. We're going to go chronologically. We're going to start off with Candyman.
What's behind the mystery?
I'm sick.
What's behind the legend?
Listen, he's under the bed!
And most terrifying of all,
Come with me.
what's behind the mirror?
He's here.
Candyman. You don't have to believe. Just beware.
All right, we are talking Candyman, the 1992 American supernatural horror film written and directed by, as Leslie pointed out, the Brit Bernard Rose, and starring Virginia Madsen, Tony Todd, Xander Berkeley, Cassie Lemons, Vanessa E. Williams. This is obviously based on a short story called The Forbidden, which I believe is included in his Books of Blood catalog, cool. Which was very funny because we just talked about that really shitty Hulu series that they made. Out of the Books of
it's
Blood
bad.
recently.
It's bad. Oh, I haven't gotten to it yet.
No, yeah, it wasn't. I mean, there were
moments,
a couple. You could see the Clive Barker in them, but it's very prestige TV polish in a way that doesn't really suit Barker. I like, for example, like in this and like in the Hellraiser films, which they borrowed a lot of the makeup artists from his Hellraiser films. I love the really like gruesome textures of both this and that movie just didn't have any of that, even though you could tell that the stories are coming from a place that was intriguing. And same here, even though this definitely is a very thorough overhaul and rewrite of his material. As Leslie kind of pointed out, there's a class-based reality to this that has really, gotten to a lot of people. And obviously they transpose it into a very sort of racial context in Chicago in the housing projects and stuff. But the original story, which I've read, is like all about the British class system. Oh, okay. And so when Rose was taking a trip to America, he kind of liked he kind of liked the look. He liked the architecture of Chicago, which you can tell by some of the shots that he chose in the film. Yeah. But that was what basically had him decide that he wanted to do this. He loved the tall skyscrapers versus these very sort of dilapidated, run-down buildings, like, not that far from them, close enough that you could look out your window and you could see them. Well, it's and I guess like, he kind of saw that image and he was like, that is how I can visualize what Barker is getting at in this, the short story that he wrote.
And it's like how they introduced the film itself. I mean, the very first shot is that bird's eye view of Chicago going from one side of the city, and then it bridges over to the next. And it right away expresses how close these two places are together, but just how different they are with, I imagine, funding and other things of that nature. So it's a great, just visual representation of the city right away as soon as the movie begins. And I loved that.
And how obviously heightened it is in terms of style right away too, with the Philip Glass, this very dreamy, very sort of like ominous, sort of like chorus and a couple electronic sounds, but also some organ sounds and a mix of all of these different sounds going into this overhead shot, which then transitions into something that, you're looking at something that is kind of obviously connecting these two locations together, but it's done in this kind of like alien vantage point you're not really used to seeing from like a grounded movie. And then all of a sudden it then cuts to, like you have Tony Todd's like reverberated, disembodied voice talking, and you have that big wide shot of the bees as it slowly zooms into them. I mean, there's something to be said, I guess, on just how sort of gracefully and sort of art house stylized Rose decided to take this material, which I think has, stood the test of time for a lot of people. I watched this movie I think I watched this movie actually twice just for this, because every time I watch this, I keep wondering if this is like the 5 for me. Right. Yeah, I have that same thing. I think there's a couple things in the writing that kind of hold me back, but the style like absolutely just sucks me in every single time, and how well it's used to render this like gothic folk tale kind of slasher that's taking place inside of a city, which is just, sort of things that you wouldn't normally combine with each other, but is done really, really well in the film.
Yeah, and they don't waste a lot of time either. Like you said, it has that image of the bees and Tony Todd's voice overlapping that, but then it goes right to the lead girl, and she's telling the story of Candyman already, or being told the story, one or the other. And I just like how they set you into that urban legend setting right away. They don't do a lot of waiting until they reveal the ghostly story that's at hand, and I just really appreciate that. It just hurdles you through this story, but there is still a lot of rich detail throughout it as well.
For sure. Were you going to say something, Leslie?
Yeah, I think it's what really stood out to me watching this is just how beautiful this movie is, and how almost no movie now looks this good and has this much care put into anything in it. The $185 million Suicide Squad, one of the dullest, most lifeless movies I've ever seen. Like, this movie rewards you for actually looking at the screen, because even if it's just two people talking in a room, they actually take the time to set up lighting over our eyes. There's these beautiful film noir like shots of Helen and just delivering exposition, just rewarding you for not looking at your phone and actually watching the movie, which is what movies used to be like. The shots of the city. Obviously, we didn't have drones back then. For this little horror movie, they had to like invent technology to get those shots. Those aerial shots. I wish I had the article up. I was just reading it earlier. Like, they had to do like some new, never before done stuff to get those shots. It's so
easy.
because
they do seem very steady for like a helicopter if that was what they were to opt for. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So it was some new technologies. Like every moment of this film is just has so much care put into it. Like it makes me mad that we lost this. Like even though I'm excited for the new Candyman and it looks good, there's no way it's going to look this good. And I think that's a shame. I think that's a shame that we all know that even if it might have cost 3 times as much, it's not going to look as good no matter what.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking of 2 specific tracking shots that I adore. Which the first one is when she's in the parking lot garage, and it just shows like the emptiness of the parking lot behind her as she's going to her car, and then Tony Todd shows up, and we'll get to that in more detail. But then another one is when she's in the project housing, and she goes from inside the project where she meets the woman, which once again we'll get to, but she goes outside and meets up with this child that's telling her about a murder that happened to a young kid. And while she's walking, instead of just like them talking and walking, it's got this insane wide shot where you can see the bathroom that he's telling the story about, but in the background you just see the entire city, and it's showing these rundown buildings, but there's this haunting beauty to some of these shots, and it's incredible to look at.
And when just watching this movie, this is obviously a standout, but I found myself over quarantine just watching a lot of 90s movies as they play on whatever Showtime, HBO, whatever's on, right? And I run across these movies, these pieces of shit that like I never would have bothered with back in the day. But when I look at them now, I'm like, wow, this movie is so much more interesting than almost anything else coming out. There was this one with Jeff Goldblum. Let me look it up right. It's an awful movie. We would have said it was awful at the time, I should say.
But it just looks fantastic.
I mean, the first problem with it is the name is so stupid. Hideaway. Okay. So there's this Jeff Goldblum movie called Hideaway from 1995, based on the Dean Koontz novel. Jeff Goldblum's daughter is Alicia Silverstone in her first, and Jeff Goldblum dies on the same night that Jeremy Sisto, very young Jeremy Sisto, dies, who's a serial killer, and they both come back to life, bring in an angel and a devil with them, and they can see each other's visions. And
Sounds wild.
Jeff Goldblum has to try to save his 16-year-old daughter, obviously playing against type as a loving father. Jeff Goldblum trying to convince you that he's not more interested in hitting on his daughter than and they do some confusing thing, because he's like, the serial killer sees the daughter and gets like horny for killing her, but Jeff Goldblum thinks he might be the serial killer himself. It's a very weird movie, but the point is that like, you see how excited I am talking about this goofy ass movie that I watched for 90 minutes. Absolutely nothing script, but it still had.
I'm gonna watch this right now.
Had so much fun stuff going on with fun characters. Ray Dong Chong is on it. She's always great to see, and it's just like there's this PS2 level CGI sequence of heaven and hell.
I just looked it up. It's the director of The Lawnmower Man.
Yes, and he does. And another really good one. And it's just like, even that crappy CGI is so interesting and will legitimately freak you out if you see it now. Even though it looks bad, it looks like there was thought put into it, and they were like, okay, the graphics are only this good. How can we make this look like creepy and weird and still freak people out? And they did it. And so I just went on that big long rant just to say, I feel like, especially with these mid-budget genre films, we get so much more bang for our buck when it came to the movie. And we didn't really appreciate it at the time, especially in the 90s. I think we just felt like, oh, this is just like some direct to VHS crap. We don't have to pay attention to it. But there's so much gold out there.
Absolutely, like especially with the some of the practical effects just in this movie. One part in particular was when, and once again, all of this is within plot, so I guess we'll have to get into a little more detail here. But eventually, you do see Tony Todd, like he's got just a a pile of bees coming out of his
Oh,
mouth.
yes.
And I don't exactly know how they did it. I don't know if they convinced Tony to be able
I
to
can
be
tell you.
like,
I can tell.
I would love
I can
to
go
know, 'cause
into it.
It's incredible.
Well, let's get into the bees. So the bees are real.
Okay, damn.
They're young. They had to raise them. They had to specially breed them to be very young, so that if they stung, they would be less likely to sting. And if they did sting, it would be less likely to cause problems. Virginia Madsen is allergic to bees, and she also agreed to be covered in bees.
Damn.
Had bees put in their mouth. It took a long time to get the bees on them, and even longer to get it off them. It was more of a tedious process, and for them, they both said they just kind of had to get in a zen position because it felt like just being tickled, obviously.
Right.
A lot when they were in your mouth and on your face. And you just kind of had to sit there, be still and zen because, of course, if you panic, they will sting. They will attack.
Right.
Tony Todd, over the franchise, did get stung about 25 times, but he got $1,000. He negotiated a $1,000 bonus every time he got stung.
That's the way to do it. Nice job, Tony.
Yeah, Tony Todd likes to joke that the bees had a bigger trailer than he did on the set of Candyman.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention, but they really took care of the bees. They had special vacuum cleaner to get them off without hurting them. So yes, they took care of the bees as well.
Yeah, well, and it just speaks to, again, sort of something that's visually interesting, but is, very clearly on a production, very arduous, but to commit to that because it's going to look great. And that's something that, a lot of people cut corners on these days, especially. So it's really nice to go back and, watch this movie, which I think a lot of people look at and they see, they're like, okay, he's a ghost monster who comes out and it's a slasher and everything, but shot by, Anthony B. Richmond, which I didn't realize until after the fact is actually the connection between these movies. The same cinematographer shot both of these movies. And he's actually a British cinematographer who worked with Nicholas Roeg. So he did Don't Look Now, The Man Who Flowers, very beautiful, beautiful films. And later in the 90s, even he did Ravenous, which is a really good looking film as well.
Oh, wow.
He also had a really crazy career where by the 2000s, he got into rom-coms and stuff. He did The Sandlot, John Tucker Must Die, Legally Blonde. I don't know what, he was just taking some paychecks at a certain point, but man, this guy really, really shot the hell out of this film. And they had a really amazing concept for this because, again, Barker, who we talked about when we did Hellraiser, he's all about taking these sort of psychological issues and these societal issues that people are experiencing and fitting them as, making them as physical and tangible as you can in terms of your story. And Bernard Rose, very clearly believed in doing the same thing. He feels this with so much grimy detail and textures to the images, which just amplifies all the nastiness of some of the writing. I'm always surprised every time I watch this at how filthy this movie is. This movie includes a child holding his crotch where his penis has just been cut off by the Candyman in a public washroom that
Covered
is just
blood.
Filled with shit and blood.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's really, really gross stuff. And for anyone who maybe, I'm hoping most people have seen it, but if you haven't seen Candyman, you would be surprised that is some of the content of the film based on the story, which, is kind of based in academia and follows Virginia Madsen's character, who is literally just trying to write a thesis on, sort of folk tales and urban folklore, and is she's willing to take it to the next level to write that really, really good thesis. And it's definitely about a kind of, whether it was, part of the original story or not, they very clearly, wanted, and they emphasize as much as they can that this is very much a white intellectual going into a, majority black community and population and, looking at a history of, sort of Tony Todd brought it into the movie, but because he's the one who came up with the backstory for the Candyman.
Oh, wow.
A history of both slavery and poverty and racial violence, and how that has made its way into, actually, real estate and city planning and gentrification. At one point, she finds out that her condo that she probably spent a lot of money on was actually just a retrofitted housing project that they realized was too close to the city, and you could actually see it from the skyscrapers and stuff. So they were like, well, we don't want to look at that ugly thing, so let's just pretty it up and sell it to, the grad students or the professors. And so there's a lot of really interesting detail, obviously, in the writing that's going on there. And yeah, Rose takes every opportunity he can to visualize it in ways that, both get into like this realistic detail of, like, for example, they actually did go to this Cabrini Green project in Chicago, and they shot on location, which was something that the producers were very upset about. And they were like, why can't we just build this shit? Why do you want to actually? And he's just like, it's not going to have that same life. It's not going to have what I saw in it when I was driving past it. That's the feeling that I want for this film. And so, yeah, they had to like actually like go in and like, for example, when Cassie Lemons and Virginia Madsen first show up to the first time they go to it, all of those guys standing out front are just real locals. Who they had to like actually pay money to just be like, yeah, will you just like let us shoot here for a little while? We'll just give you some money and just, you could just be in the movie and you can just be yourself.
Oh, that's killer. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, they went above and beyond to really get into, to really explore these themes in a very tangible way, and then also to use the style to heighten it. The one thing I really love about the Tony Todd character, especially, is that if you just kind of take out some of the scenes where he is obviously just absolutely shredding someone's body. He's shoving a hook up someone's rectum and pulling it up their spine. If you just like looked away from that, Tony Todd, and he says this all the time in all the interviews that he does, like he viewed this as like a romance story.
Okay.
He was like, I went into this where he was just like, I had this character who was filled with both rage at obviously the horrible racist violence that was done to him, and also filled with longing and yearning for his lost love. And Virginia Madsen's character is supposed to kind of replace that in the modern day.
Right.
And so the way that he talks about it was that, Bernard Rose had him and her do like ballroom dancing lessons together so that they could get this romantic physicality going when he picks her up. And he was just like, so the way that he sees it is he plays it, yes, where the style heightens, the reverb on his voice and how disembodied and ominous he kind of is. But all of the lines are like, come with me, be with me.
Yeah.
like this kind of stuff. So it's a very interesting clashing where you feel some sympathy, I think, for the Candyman.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're completely horrified by the things that take place in the film. And when it goes genre movie mode, it doesn't, look away from that. That's one thing that I think Bernard Rose needs to be really credited with, is that clearly he was coming at this from the point of view of, I'm a serious artistic British filmmaker and I'm going to get the guy who shot Don't Look Now to shoot this film. And you would think with someone with that, I'm going to get Philip Glass to do the score. You would think with someone with that sensibility would be embarrassed that they're making a horror film. A lot of people in that time sometimes were.
You're right.
And this guy absolutely was not. He was like, I'm going to make this as nasty and unappealing and disgusting as I possibly can. And it earns its, slasher bona fides, even if it's, very thought through and stylistically rendered.
Yeah. And a lot
like shit, when Ted Raimi's blood, or when Ted Raimi sees the blood coming up from the girl in like the opening story that she's being told and stuff like that, just really gross.
Yeah, and I love that it's also coming down from the ceiling, like it's leaking through the ceiling in that urban legend, which was great. Definitely reminded me of Body Double a little bit. Just
and obviously too, it's so much about like the violence being done through the planning and the architecture and this stuff too, right? Like how it's actually seeped its way into the buildings and everything around them.
Yeah.
Like Candyman literally pops out through the mirror in one of like the greatest jump scares of the 90s probably, which is his hook just slamming through that mirror, which starts like a 1 minute tracking shot of her running through her apartment. And every single time she gets to a new escape point, in the periphery in the background, you can just see Tony Todd.
Yeah. I also love that because it turns into this kind of psychological game for the lead that at a certain point you don't quite know at any point the Candyman could pop up and start killing people. Like for instance, when she eventually gets into the hospital because they think that she's doing the murders that the Candyman is doing, she's just having a normal conversation with the doctor, just kind of like finding out that she's been there for a month because she's been under heavy medication. And just as they're having a normal conversation, out of nowhere, Candyman just appears behind him out of the blue.
Well, no, that's when she calls him, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was when they were having a discussion in the office.
Oh, she calls
him. It is,
him.
But she tells the psychiatrist, I can prove it. I can call him here right now. And then she looks in the mirror and she says Candyman 5 times.
Oh,
and then you're right. He just pops into frame.
But there is a pause before he comes out where you think, oh, nothing's going to happen. Because at that point in the movie, you're still deciding, oh, maybe she is just crazy. Because before that, they showed a video of her freaking out about seeing Tony Todd in her hospital room, but nobody's there. So at that point, you can think, oh, maybe this is just a psychological thriller and all the supernatural elements aren't real. And after she says Candyman that 5th time, they don't wait 3 seconds. They wait like 4, just enough to throw you off. And then he pops out.
And he just drives that hook through his back and pulls it all the way up, and blood just like squirts around everywhere. And speaking of which, too, you brought it up. I love that scene where he frames her for the dead dog and the missing baby, because it starts with him hypnotizing her in the parking lot, right? And then she passes out and she wakes up into this this very beautiful tracking shot that is just her covered in blood, the floor covered in blood. She opens up the door and the camera just sort of like on the steady cam, just kind of, or maybe it's even just handheld, just follows her as she looks down and she sees a decapitated dog head next to a meat cleaver. And for some reason, she decides she's going to pick it up, I guess because she's scared and she thinks someone else might be in there actually.
And she's in the movie. She's in the movie. She has to pick it up.
Yeah, of course. But she picks it up and then moves in and sees that, the woman who lives in the project, who she was just previously interviewing for her thesis about the murder of the woman named Ruthie in the project there, which apparently, by the way, it was a real murder. And part of the inspiration for the whole bathroom mirror thing was that in one of those housing projects in Chicago, there was someone who actually did break through from one apartment to the other using that trick and killed someone.
Oh, wow.
Which was apparently...
Well, before we don't want to gloss over that, because it's actually a really tragic story, and you can read this on Chicago Reader. It's a woman named Ruthie Mae McCoy, and she called. So she was a black woman who's had some issues with mental illness, but was getting better, and she called the police saying that some people are trying to break into my apartment through the mirror, through my bathroom mirror. And they thought she was like crazy but that is actually true. You can, because of the way those buildings were designed, it was that easy to get to someone else's into someone else's apartment. And so when the cops showed up there late, they knock on the door and they decide that and they don't hear any answer, and they decide to just leave. like they're trying to figure they can't find the super to open up the place, so the cops just leave, and she ends up bleeding to death and dying, and nobody finds her until the next day.
Wow, that's insane.
Yep. So that's what's very interesting about this, is that very clearly Rose saw this in the way that it looked, and some of the history of it, and that was why he wanted to transpose the story, because that makes its way into the movie, right?
It's
where
actually not.
They end up.
It's honestly not giving Rose that much credit, because if you go back and read the article about Ruthie Mae McCoy, and I think anybody who's over the age of say 30 remembers how people reported on housing projects and black on black crime. They talked about us like we were basically animals, and you could, even when you're reading those original articles, you read that's not in Candyman. That's not how he looked at that. He doesn't has judgment on people in the projects for the violence that's going on there. He actually points to the real causes of poverty, of class structure. So it's not even it's letting too many people off the hook to say that, oh, he was talking about these real issues of the time, but he was talking about them in the way that the nightly news wouldn't for years later. Like even in your life,
Definitely.
like Black Lives Matter. Like, no, he like this, schlocky horror film had an understanding and sensitivity of these issues that you couldn't get until maybe 5 years ago from the New York, if that.
Well, that's why you'll hear the characters go like so many characters say to Virginia Madsen's character, just like, we called for help and no one came and no one got here. And then the first time that she's attacked by a dude pretending to be the Candyman in the bathroom and just like, given a big bruise, a white woman in the washroom, instantly the entire brigade is in, someone is arrested. Yes. It's immediately a top priority that she got punched in the face.
And she calls it out and she says, wow, yeah, they people have been murdered, but I get hit and everybody's here. Like, yeah, brilliant commentary. And I feel like even the average movie that comes out today does not have that level of realism or understanding.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Yeah, I think this movie really absorbs the sort of the location and the history that they opted to because you could look at it and you could say they just cynically threw on this stuff onto a story that didn't have it, but I think that it's fairly well thought through in the way that they actually do apply all of this stuff together, and the way also that it that despite the fact that it's very, very gruesome and nasty, that it has moments of thoughtfulness and sensitivity in that kind of way as well. And that's why you can
have both. You can have both.
Yes.
You don't
It's crazy thought.
Yeah, you can have good politics and not be a fucking square. Who thought it?
Yeah, and I really do like a lot of how much this sticks close to just Virginia Madsen's it sort of psychological breakdown experience with what she's seeing, because one, obviously she's confronting very realistic political suffering of people, and that's something that she's investigating, but then she's also looking at it as a kind of a story, a folklore, and part of the film is obviously that the Candyman only really exists and is this tangible thing because people believe in him, and that's why he is as gruesome as he is, because he wants people to keep telling his story so that he can remain immortal in his own way, and he wants her to join him in that. But I do like that that there's kind of like, this experience that she's having is one that is being, it's both fantastical and tangible at the same time. And it's very, hit on in the style. One sequence I really love is when, she just had the conversation, I think, with the mother of the baby, Anthony, who's the one who gets kidnapped later by Candyman. And she's telling the story about how she heard Ruthie's screams through the walls and she called 911 and nobody came. And, everyone is terrified about these things that can come through the walls. Cut to, she's at a very nice dinner with like these snobby professors, including her boyfriend, or her husband, actually, is one of them, Trevor, played by Xander Berkeley, who I always think of as the guy who cucks Al Pacino in Heat. And Al Pacino yells at him about, you can have my wife, but you can't have my fucking TV, or whatever it is that he says. But she has this conversation where she's, given in exposition the backstory of the Candyman, which again, they kind of tossed around different various ideas. And ultimately Tony Todd came up with this very, this son of a former slave who became this artist for, sort of like rich white folks, and eventually fell in love with one of the daughters that he was paid to paint, and, wanted to get married to her, had a child with her. And, he suffered, a lynch mobbing because of it, including obviously having honey put on him and being stung to death, having his arm sawed off with a rusty blade, and being burnt to death, which is all things we end up seeing over the course of the film done to various people. But as that story is being told to her, the choice of shot is just this one slow zoom on her face where the lighting switches so that it's just a shot of her eyes as she's smoking, and it slowly moves in as she can hear all of the sounds of the history just getting into her brain. She can hear the screams of Tony Todd having his arm sawed off. She can hear the bees. She can hear all of this stuff. And there's something just so interesting to me, I guess, about this idea that, you know, a story could become something physical to someone else. And that is something that the movie deals with a lot, and, you know, how it is to her. And it becomes a situation on, you know, is this a kind of, you know, this is a real historical racial violence and pain that people are experiencing. And is it people coping with it by coming up with a story and then it comes back into something tangible? Or is he a physical manifestation of that, you know, that rage or that longing? And, you know, they kind of leave it a little ambiguous overall, because by the end of the film, there is a little bit of a, you know, Tony Todd, you know, needs to be defeated and the curse needs to continue. I think some of the writing, I think, gives way to a little bit of the genre sensibilities where it's just like we weren't really sure exactly how to bring these ideas completely home. It did kind of feel honestly, like by the time it hits there, it doesn't matter to me. I think it's just so well realized in the filmmaking. Yeah,
it did kind of feel like they added the whole shitty, cheating husband thing so that they could have her little twist of "I am the ghost now" at the end for him a little bit. It felt just slightly disconnected to the Candyman thing, even though I do understand that I guess, you know, in a way the Candyman character was trying to keep this curse eternal and everlasting. It did feel just a little bit tacked on when she like shows up in his bathroom and, you know, kills the guy. I don't know. It felt just a little disconnected.
Well, I definitely felt it just kind of lost some of the thread on the idea, which is, you know, if you're trying to go with the idea that, you know, this is a thing that is happening supernaturally because of a community's pain being made manifest into this story. You know, what does it mean now that she is the martyr or she is the character? And I wasn't quite sure exactly what they were trying to get at with that, other than, you know, it kind of makes sense in a genre context of, you know, the curse just keeps transferring and, you know, it has that that It Follows kind of thing where it just, you know, it just keeps going.
It just feels less meaningful than Candyman's motives. You know what I mean? I guess that's
definitely,
that's what I find it a bit silly compared to everything else.
Mm-hmm. But I gotta say, like, everything, even that stuff that I don't think works completely in the writing, it's still well done. Like, I really like the big finale, like where she goes into his lair and they have like the big 360 romantic shot around them, and he reveals his rib cage filled with bees and starts kissing bees into her mouth, and then you cut to the overhead shot of the giant like funeral pyre basically that they are making to trap the Candyman and burn him again. But then, you know, now it has the baby in it and she has to like crawl through it and bring the baby out. And they always include that nasty detail of it too, where like, you know, her hair gets fucking like burned off as she's carrying that baby out. She gets Anakin Skywalker Revenge of the Sith a little bit as she's crawling out, and, you know, she dies from the severe burns. And, you know, and you know, obviously again, the music really kicks in there as well, you know, like, so they spent long enough, I think, developing the emotion between, you know, Candyman's longing for this woman who reminds him of his lost love, and then also, you know, sort of like the gruesomeness of continuing this story and, you know, trying to, you know, have this legendary burning where the baby is dead and they're both dead and everyone talks about how the Candyman did it and now they live, you know, forever. But she, you know, kind of defies him and, you know, just becomes the Candyman herself.
And I do like that
Candy Woman Wen.
A mural is created for her as well, where the Candyman's once was.
Right.
That was
I love the production design of that layer, by the way, with all the I think the production designer mentioned that they basically, that's one of the few things that they built. Obviously, but they basically built it as if it was the above rundown apartments at Cabrini Green, where they said that they took a lot of photos of the ones that weren't inhabited, that they were actually like the walls were crumbling and stuff. So they wanted to make like this weird sort of quasi church to the Candyman, where they have, sort of like Sistine Chapel paintings of his story on the walls. And they had this backstory that they don't really touch on in the film, where they kind of said, what if some of the people who, believe in him and keep him alive, they worshipped him here. This was like where they remembered his story and drew his pictures and said his name and, all that kind of stuff. But you totally get that from the design of the lair. You don't need anyone to give you the exposition on that.
Yeah. I love the shot of her entering into that lair, and in order for her to do so, she has to crawl out of his mouth, like the painting of his mouth. It's such a great image. Yeah, it's perfect. Like he's already consumed her, kind of thing, and she's on for the ride. So yeah, it's really, really good stuff.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts about the ending, Leslie?
No, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fine that it transferred to her, and and now that you say Helen in the mirror instead of Candyman, like that's just good horror to me. And it seemed like the point that Candyman was trying to get at, the line that stuck with me is so much better to not exist, to just be a myth to Helen. And it seemed to me that was more like her becoming, the spirit of vengeance was like an upgrade for her from her life. Because now
there's more power there.
Yeah, there's more power there, and she can right the wrongs. Because you saw when the people from the project showed up at her funeral, they all gave the evil eye to her husband, right? And then she comes back and kills him. And so I can see that as now she's the spirit of vengeance for this project, and maybe she'll do things differently than Candyman, who just was kind of black pilled and taking out his, violence on anybody who crossed his path. Maybe Helen will use it viciously.
Well, I do like Tony Todd's whole pitch that he gives her about how good it is to, sort of like live in other people's dreams, and all of these sort of stylistic choices that kind of, are trying to get her involved in that. Like some of the collapsing of the space. I think about like the scene where she's being driven from the hospital back to the apartment or the condo, and there's a part where she's in like the back of the car, and she is basically the shot is a dolly shot that's basically walking her through like the actual layer and the halls. Like basically she's in the back of the car, but she physically feels like she's back in Cabrini Green, and then eventually that all collapses into like a shot of the white sky that completely overpowers her, which then combines with the hospital. Like her psychological state and how it's reflected in the filmmaking, and how she's basically being asked to be in this, this other world, this other realm, is very, very well done. But yeah, I think that this movie really, really works. Surprise. I mean, I think it's become like a cult favorite to a lot of people for, very obvious reasons that, as Leslie pointed out, it's obviously just a very well done horror story, regardless of the ideas that it's trying to get at. But the ideas are also there. It's well thought through, and the style is all there. That's the big one for me, is that, I think that there's a lot of very graceful sort of formal elegance to the whole thing. It switches very knowingly between like these very artful compositions that are taking in sort of like the architecture and the space, and then, doing these really horrifying tracking suspense sequences where she is, being chased by the Candyman, and, like the most classic slasher sense imaginable. Like some of the use of the, doing a wide shot where Tony Todd just appears at the end of the hall in the periphery. It's like classic John Carpenter stuff. Yeah. So, to have a movie that is doing both of those things at the same time and doing both well, it's kind of hard to come by. A lot of people just, now they like to just do, we're kind of a horror movie, but mostly an art house movie. When you think about it, we're not going to stoop down to the low art genre fare, and this movie just doesn't do that at all. It is a gothic folktale slasher kind of story with all the graceful compositional architecture and dreamy, gory horror that you could ask for. And again, that Philip Glass score, it's an all timer. One of my favorite scores. I listen to it just all the time, like the piano and the pipe organ and the chorus stuff. The switching between the major and the minor key stuff in it is just unbelievable. It's very trance-like, which is very well suited to, the Candyman kind of hypnotizing you into this dream world. And, the film, both the style and the score definitely, do that to you as an audience member a bit.
Yeah, this film does have kind of like a hypnotic quality to it, I find. I'd give this like a high 4. I absolutely.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Yeah, same here. This gets the high 4. I watched it twice just to see if it does. It doesn't. I feel like maybe even with another watch it could do it. But yeah, high 4 for me.
Yeah, I've seen this. I think this is my 3rd or 4th time, and every single time I like it a little more. I will say that, and I love the way that they shoot Chicago in this. It's gorgeous, and then at times also just showing the dilapidated buildings. It's obviously gorgeously shot, but it shows definitely a sadness with a community that isn't being properly taken care of, and then to connect that with an incredibly visceral and violent ghost story that also is somehow wrapped up in kind of love in a way is something else. It's a very hauntingly beautiful film, and I think everyone should definitely check it out. It's great. So yeah, 4 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, for you, Leslie.
Me, I would have to give it 4.5 out of 5. I think every time I watch it, I like it more, and this is going to end up all-time favorite horror. I think it's really, really excellent. Does almost everything I can think of well, and does so many great things that there's very few movies that I think even from the era, I think if you go shot for shot, there's very few movies around this time that look as good, that are this evocative and I think it's very much underappreciated.
Absolutely. And I have to say too, before we wrap up, that the all those creepy overhead shots of the skyscrapers and the expressive like graffiti murals and the expensive condo surfaces that give way to just this dirty crumbling bricks that they're covering up, like all of that stuff is so like, I don't know why there's not more films that do stuff like that actually use their their sets and their mise en scène and stuff like that to actually get at what the story is actually saying. And the fact that this movie did not pass up any opportunity to visually express the underseen horror that is, not just a dude being lynched, but of living in the shadow of white real estate development is like something that, for some reason it doesn't occur to a lot of people to do anymore. And I need to see more of that. Yeah.
Like one shot I just want to say to finalize it, I guess, is the one where it has the trash heap and it's on fire and Helen and the baby and Candyman are inside. But in the background, you can see all of the pristine skyscrapers of Chicago in the actual like deeper city. And it's just such a contrast there. That one shot I found was beautiful, but also, sadness is involved as well.
Yeah, it's a movie that has that and also has shit-covered walls everywhere, which I had a great time listening to the production designers discuss how many different kinds of shit they had to present them with to smear the walls with. So, this is the kind of things that were on their mind, both, very, very, elegant kind of camera work and, thoughtful ideas and just the most disgusting textures you could possibly think of. This has all of it. So if you haven't seen Candyman, definitely give it a look, especially because there's a new Candyman out in theaters right now.
Yeah.
And it's supposedly a quasi-sequel or a late sequel, legacy sequel, whatever you want to call them. So now's a good time. But yeah, that being said, I think that wraps it up here for Candyman. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about Tales from the Hood.
And executive producer Spike Lee will take you to the outer limits of the inner city.
Welcome to hell!
Tales from the Hood. Chew. Or be chewed.
Hey man, I don't need to be hearing this, man.
Written and produced by Darren Scott. Written and directed by Rusty Cundiff.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Tales from the Hood, the 1995 horror comedy anthology film directed by Rusty Cundiff. I'm not sure if I got that right. And executive produced by Spike Lee. The film, obviously, for anyone unfamiliar with it, is a series of short horror stories that kind of have that sort of that have a wraparound story to them. It's going back to kind of like not even Creepshow, but even older than that. It's going back to like the old school. Obviously, it's a big Tales from the Crypt reference, but also like things like Dead of Night is like a big reference point for it as well. Like one of the OG horror anthologies, which kind of saw their way back to life after the popularity of Creepshow, where they made like Creepshow 2, and they even in the 90s they managed to get like John Carpenter and George Romero to come back and do one. You might remember that one, Jamie, Body Bags.
Oh yeah,
that they did.
That was
which
fun.
Not as good as this film, but the first one that John Carpenter did does have a really awesome kind of like campfire bedtime story quality to it. It reminded me a little bit of him going back to like the Fog days.
Yeah.
And speaking of, we just tied this into Candyman and like folklore and stuff. What's interesting about Tales from the Hood is that obviously, as Leslie kind of pointed out, this takes a very overtly unsubtle political stance on every single one of its horror stories. And I was reminded of the lesson that Trevor is giving at the beginning of Candyman, where he describes it as, it's modern oral folklore, but also the unself-conscious reflection of the fears of urban society is what he says. And if there was ever a movie that like took very explicitly like in the headline kind of political stories and then rendered it into, really, really well crafted little horror stories that, as Leslie mentioned earlier too, absolutely do stand up to, some of the greatest horror anthology films. This honestly, I think I might even like this more than I like a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
I think that like this is better than Body Bags.
Yep.
This is better than Dead of Night for sure. I haven't watched a lot of the OG Tales from the Crypt, so that's something I need to catch up on.
Yeah,
but Jamie, I think you even prefer this to like Creepshow, right?
Yep. Yeah, I do. I think that I'd have to really look at the list of anthology films I've seen, but this is like got to be top 3, if not my favorite. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is that just the consistency of them and the uniqueness of each one, because we'll break down each individual one, because they're each one is sort of centered around a topic. One kind of addresses police corruption, one addresses domestic abuse, one addresses like racism and white supremacy, and one addresses sort of like gang violence and again white supremacist violence as well. So there, each one kind of takes a very specific subject. And what's very interesting is that a lot of the time you would think, well, the subject then dictates the actual genre that they're doing. But each one is done in like a very different kind of genre as well. Like the first one almost gets to like action horror heights. The second one gets kind of more like this more sort of, sort of like domestic childhood kind of like horror movie. Like I think about the kid hiding from like this like werewolf monster creature trying to break into his room, and like the lighting from the hallway leaking into his room and that. Yeah. And like that's a very different style than, sort of like the white supremacist the political one, where it's like that one's more like Stuart Gordon's Dolls, which is a movie we've covered on this show, and we had a blast talking about all the different ways that you can do POV shots of a little tiny stop motion doll running to kill someone. Yeah. And this film does all of these different styles well. And that's something that, once again, you can't always say for people who attempt these anthology films. But Leslie, what's your experience with this film?
I mean, I've always watched it. It's always on the top of your aunt's VHS player, a copy of this. You always, and what stands out to me, like you said about the different styles and the way it does everything well. Like you look at the most Tales from the Crypty one is like the white supremacist David Duke guy, right? But then other ones, like you said, like they're their own thing. And the last tale, I think, explicitly, I'm not sure how many things you can compare it to. because there are references to something like A Clockwork Orange, but like it's about Angela Davis like torturing a prisoner until he like gets woke, like showing him the error of his ways. Like, I don't know what other kind of horror story you can really compare that to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, some of the imagery in it, the only thing I could clock, because I was watching some of them and I was like, I can see some of the things that they pulled from some of these stories, especially too in that first one with the police corruption, because it literally just pulled kind of from like some of the really, really sleazy 80s cop movies a little bit too. Like there's the Wings Hauser appears as like the greasiest cop you've ever seen, so large. And we've talked about him before because he was absolutely horrifying as the villain in that movie Vice Squad. Yeah, he's like the dude's an unhinged crazy man. So as soon as I clocked that they, Wings Hauser wasn't a huge actor, so the fact that they had Wings Hauser in that movie, I was like, okay, so this one is like a horror Vice Squad kind of moment. Yeah. But yeah, with that last one, I was like, some of the imagery of kind of like where the prison kind of looks like this castle, and it kind of has some of like, even the torture stuff has kind of like this mad scientist element. I thought they were going back to like old monster movies or something like that. But yeah, other than that, I couldn't clock some of the, like what other movie I've seen that's even remotely like that movie.
Yeah, it feels like he's just going deeper and deeper into like hell of some kind. He like at a certain point he's walking and he sees just body bags being pulled by like some wheel cart and things like that. Like it's just absolutely crazy.
So it is a bit Jacob's Ladder. It's a bit Jacob's Ladder.
A little bit, yeah.
It does have that going for it, but man, it just, you don't expect to see that in a horror anthology, and it feels like so real and dealing with this real conflict and pain is very black issues. Like when he meets that white supremacist, and the white supremacist is like, "Oh no, man, me and you good, but you kill a bunch of niggers too." And I'm like damn, that's just something a white filmmaker can't go.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so dark.
Yeah, just can't go there, and just not going to have the sensitivity where even though he still is this piece of shit, he still gets the opportunity to say, hey, I am the nightmare created by the society. And all Angela Davis stand-in has to say is, well, at some point you got to take responsibility for yourself, or you're going to die yourself. And he dying, and is no real like happy ending or resolution or clear cut, oh, this is the intellectual upright black way of dealing with these things, because that's just not the perspective that Rusty comes with. I want to mention the reason he can, I think he's so good at handling all these different styles. Well, not the reason, but an example of it is he directed 26 episodes of the Chappelle Show, where he's doing
shit, I didn't know that.
Which is a pretty well made TV show, sketch comedy TV show.
It is, absolutely.
That handled a lot of different styles and genres, and it just shows like his level of talent there that I don't really think was tapped by Hollywood. He was able to get 2 sequels to Tales from the Hood made in the past couple of years. I haven't had a chance to watch them yet. I hope they're pretty good, but he's obviously someone that has a lot of talent. And if Hollywood was not as racist, we would be talking about him as much as we talk about Carpenter, probably.
That was, I mean, when I first saw this, because the first time that I saw this movie was actually a year or two ago. And when I saw it, I was shocked that more people didn't talk about it, because I just felt it was right up there with all the other like 80s and 90s horror movies that everybody constantly discusses.
Let's be real. Like when people hear the name Tales from the Hood, they don't think, body bags, creep show, they think scary movie. They think like some sort of silly black knockoff parody. I think people can be honest with themselves and admit that when they see Tales from the Hood and the skull with the gold tooth and the sunglasses, they think this is going to be Less Than. How could you not? If you grew up in America, how could you not see that and assume that this is going to be a Less Than, less intellectual, less thoughtful, less political? When of course it's the exact opposite. It's more thoughtful. More intellectual than a lot of stuff, while still being fun and also really nailing the special effects. Like really doing the horror stuff right. Like I feel like with a lot of the new kind of horror where it's trying to be politically conscious, they're not nailing the horror element as much. They're narrowing they got the social part, but not the thriller part. And I think Tales from the Hood, by all means, nails all the horror and the thriller elements that it's going for.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I love the crazy place. I mean, it sets you up like pretty much near the beginning with, you know, sort of like the tone that it's going for, like the wraparound segment, which a lot of the time too, when you watch these movies, the wraparound segment isn't good, but the wraparound segment in this is even good.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Which, you know, is a testament to how well done this is. Like Clarence Williams III just absolutely hamming it up.
R.I.P. Lost legend.
R.I.P. Yeah,
Lost in this
yeah,
year.
he's got
as the eccentric owner of this funeral home named Mr. Sims. And, you know, he's got like this olive green, you know, sort of like Mr. Glass looking suit on. And he's got like this cane. And, you know, these guys are there to pick up drugs. And he's like, oh, you guys are looking for drugs? I got some embalming fluid. And he's just like really hamming it up. And he's the whole point is obviously that this is then structured around, you know, he's going to show these 3 drug dealers who came in to pick up the drugs that they're going to take back out. But while they're walking through, he's going to deliver them some stories on, you know, the various bodies that are, you know, in his funeral homes and how they got there. And, you know, it's very specifically, you know, he's got the bodies of all these various black men who have died. And
sorry, I have to throw some shade. Much better than the framing of Body Bags. I'm sorry, John.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's because it's the same setup, but like this one is just so much better.
Oh yeah.
No, you're right. Like we actually did Body Bags as one of our live watches, and we had fun watching it. But like it's just not this. They're the shorts, even though they're kind of goofy and still kind of fun, like the idea of what Mark Hamill getting a rapist's eyeball put in his head and then becoming a rapist or a killer, you know, like it's just like in concept, you know, it's entertaining, but it's not as thought through as a lot of these are. And, you know, unfortunately, other than I think the first Carpenter one in there, the craft isn't, you know, as up to par as they are here. Like this first one about police corruption, where it's just this young black cop who's, you know, been taken in by this, you know, this white partner for a routine traffic stop, where they basically just beat and billy club this civil rights activist and councilman for, you know, investigating them for corruption.
A community organizer.
Then, you know, blatantly admit to. Yeah.
Literally, like a young Obama if he was actually like about it.
Yeah.
And then don't they like frame his suicide, right, with one of like the just most disgusting portrayals too. Like they inject him with they put a needle in his arm and send the car off the dock.
Yeah,
because they want his reputation to be tarnished, so that people look at the civil rights activist and they go, well, that guy was a hypocrite. We don't need to listen to anything that he had to say.
It's worth pointing out
that guilt.
That's a real thing that happened to civil rights like leaders. That's like literally a real thing that happened to them. Having drugs planted. I mean, that was COINTELPRO's like modus operandi, like planting drugs on people, getting community leaders. That is just a thing, a lot of people might not remember that. Get the name. The black politician passed away a couple of years ago. He had the comic book written about him. His name, John Lewis. Yeah. So John Lewis is a famous civil rights leader and known for being, you know, a politician. But a lot of people don't know that the way he got into office was actually by smearing another black candidate, a more not necessarily radical, but more left-leaning candidate as possibly being a drug user in order to win the white vote. So John Lewis, who is known as this historic, you know, civil rights leader, pro-black leader, actually used some of the politics that you see in this film to smear another activist. So this is like there's even like that little small detail about a local black politician being associated with drugs or sex work or anything like that, gang stuff like that. Those are just real stories that we were reading in our newspaper, and we can never know if it was a real thing, if they were being framed by the cops, if they were being framed by a political rival. We just never knew.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to see this movie, you know, like to again take that in and then render it in, you know, a very explicitly suspenseful little short story like this, because it's really horrifying when, you know, he's sitting there, the black cop's trying to, like, you know, thinking about calling this in and telling other people what happened to it, but they were like, no, we stick together, cut the shit, like we have to, you know, we need to have a form of unity where it's us against them, and you know, they are literally just beating this man, filling him up with heroin, and then killing him, and then throwing him in the river, all in, you know, the name of kind of like an optics game, because they don't want to be shown to be corrupt, to be, you know, stealing evidence and selling drugs, which they are doing. Yes. Yeah,
which they did do.
That's why they have the drugs to use on him. Like, yeah, and also, you know, you have someone like Wings Hauser too, who is like the really nasty one who's doing all of this stuff too. Like, you know, he really makes you like hate him. Like when he walks over, and you know, I think it's supposed to be 1 year later on the anniversary of what the cops did to this civil rights.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to mention, I felt so happy when they just jumped ahead a year in this, because I feel like I'm so used to watching stuff on Netflix and TV shows. Like, no, we would need to spend like a whole like hour explaining everything he went through between the time the death and the night where the anniversary and most other things. There was like, no, it's a year later. Now here's the important thing that's going to happen. You don't have to see him turn in his badge, do this, do that, do the other thing.
Right.
Like, just show him a bottle of whiskey, and that's all we need to know.
Exactly, you get it. You know that he's like this drunk walking around town. He's looking at a mural of this political leader, and the thing is like coming to life, and you know, telling him that he needs to, you know, bring you know, all the people who did it to his grave, bring them to me.
He sees him on a cross.
Is what he says.
Oh,
he
that's
sees him on
such
the
a
cross,
good touch.
yeah.
The cross is such a good
The
touch.
imagery is so good.
And which is really, you know, kind of edgy, because this is a movie made for a black audience. Lots of, you know, but hey, he got away with it. He did it in a way that didn't seem to piss off your grandma.
Yeah, well, and it just, you know, again, it's a physical manifestation of his guilt. He sees him as a martyr who died for this thing, but you know, he's not going to be known as that because of what these cops did. So he brings them to the cemetery, and the cops are like pissing on his grave, and you know, there's the sense of mood as like the lightning is striking in the background, and then it just goes crazy. This is all a long-winded way of getting to what Leslie's been talking about, sort of like how good the effects work is in this movie. When he just like reaches up and grabs that dude by the balls from inside the grave and like drags him down and everything, it's sick. It looks so good. Like there's this awesome like overhead shot that then drops into a low angle shot just in time for you to see that hand reach out and grab him and smash his head all on the tombstone, and also the image of cops just unloading their pistols into the tombstone as well.
Also when they're driving away and he somehow gets on top of the roof, and they have that great shot of him looking through the windshield, and he's got the like blue eye contacts, and he's like yelling at them and all that.
This is like it turns into like a zombie action movie for like a minute.
There's a very high energy level to the filmmaking, especially in this skit in particular, when the action starts to build. I also like when this is before they kill him, but I like the accents on some of the violence that they do. Like right before he punches one of the cops in the face, the reason he does that is because they toss his head through the fucking window, like the car window, and they do this shot from inside the car, and it kind of goes into like slow-mo as the glass breaks, and there's just some really awesome filmmaking techniques just involved in the action itself.
Oh yeah, I love when the civil rights zombie uses telepathy to pick up all of the heroin needles lying in the alley with all these homeless people, and just fires them at the dude and crucifies this cop with heroin needles.
And one goes in straight into his mouth too.
Yeah, and there's a POV shot of it flying towards his mouth, and then a POV shot of inside his mouth where it hits the camera. Like just really visually inventive stuff. Where like they didn't need to go that hard for it, and they did, and it's awesome.
And
like
the idea of that guy being then kind of like fused into the wall as graffiti art.
And it looks so
I thought it was
good.
really amazing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
when he melts into
I
the
just
painting.
also like that connection with Candyman.
Yeah, very much Candyman-esque. And when he melts into the painting, it's only like 3 seconds, but they had to put hours, days into that effect, and it's just so shocking. Like I watched it like 3 times in a row, and it's just like basically flawless.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, all the melting stuff, it looks like the Chuck Russell blob thing for a brief moment before it then turns into the painting. And I like too that each one of these, except for the last one, is kind of framed as like kind of like this bit of like this, there's sort of like this sort of righteous revenge story a little bit to it here. Like obviously the civil rights activist getting to kill all these cops in very gruesome detail. I mean, he literally pulls Wings Hauser's head off of him through the top of the car. Yeah, so he gets some good revenge in here. But even the he gets to do this thing where he totally melts him into the mural and he goes, "Welcome to my world," and he says like the younger cop who was obviously there and was sort of complicit in what was happening. He says like, "Am I good now?" And he says, "Where were you when I needed you?" Yeah, and totally blows him off. And then the dude gets institutionalized and blamed for all of the deaths of the fellow officers, where they basically just say that he went crazy and just killed all of his coworkers essentially. So it's interesting that there's always still a little bit of complexity to some of the character work, even if these are like 20-minute long like little short stories.
Yeah, they feel rich with detail with it. Like with every single one being 20 minutes, they are able to package so many ideas into all 4 of them. Yeah, and really taboo and risky ideas, like we'll get to, especially with the 4th one, which we kind of mentioned already. But I was just shocked at some of the places that they went, and with such confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of these, but like the one after the police corruption one's the domestic abuse one, and this one takes a little bit of its time to kind of reveal what it is that it's doing, but it does it in a really interesting way where like you just get stories at school of this young boy who's showing up with bruises, and he has kind of like a teacher who sees it and wonders if he's getting beat up by the boys outside, and the boy just kind of mentions that it's just his mom isn't home much, and his dad is gone, and the person who's doing to him is something called the monster, and he copes with that by like drawing pictures of this that he can then sort of the way he sees it, he can kind of control, and he can fight back against this thing by visualizing it, and then for example maybe crumpling the paper. But there's great stylistic moments like when he draws the boy who's kind of bullying him at school, Tyrone, and he draws him in the drawing. And then you get that shot of him crumpling the piece of paper. And as he's crumpling the piece of paper, you can just hear the little boy scream. Yeah. And you could hear like Walter, or you can basically like hear the boy breaking and screaming. And they go outside and they're like, yeah, I know, he just fell. He must have had like weak bones or something like that. And so, there's subtle little cues to where this story is kind of going. But I really love in particular how they drew the sequences of
the monster,
how he visualized the monster himself. Yeah, like I love the shots of him hiding in his bed and the little claw slightly opening up the door, and sort of like the orange light peeling into his room.
Gives
and all
that
of
fantasy
this
element of it, which is clearly what is revealed later. So yeah, it's really smart in the sense of the filmmaking.
Well, because I think about it when it is revealed, right? Like he hears the stomping, the door opens, and you get the shot of the claw, but then it's all revealed in kind of like this sort of like dirty behind the legs, behind the butt kind of shot of the mother's boyfriend.
Yeah,
and he's holding the piece of paper that depicts him as a monster that the teacher gave him and everything.
And his